Today I'm going to discuss one of the many reasons why evolution is impossible. Now, if someone tries to convince you of evolution, you'll probably be told that it's supported by multiple independent lines of overwhelming scientific evidence. And when this happens, you're being told, trust me, I'm a scientist, I have credentials, and evolution did occur. But you're not being given a plausible explanation as to how evolution could occur through laws of science. If you want to know how evolution could actually occur, you're likely to be given very superficial explanations. For example, you might be told that humans evolved from apes, and a fragmented line of fossils is presented as evidence. But how did this happen? How did higher intelligence evolve from lower intelligence? You won't be told how, other than the brain got larger, perhaps through enhanced nutrition. But how could mutations create the complex integrated circuitry of a brain? These questions are never addressed because there are no answers. Today I'm going to analyze the substance of the proposed mechanism of evolution so that you can judge for yourself based on very straightforward logic. Essentially, everyone who has believed in evolution from Darwin's day to now has relied on false concepts of inheritance. Darwin described the mechanism of evolution as random variations plus natural selection plus time. And he termed this descent with modification. This is a paradigm that's promulgated in virtually every college-level biology class, and it is utterly false. With the understanding of DNA, it's now known that the only way that evolution could possibly occur would be a fundamental change or mutation to occur in a genetic code, not selection of pre-existing variations. Now, this proposed mechanism of evolution is one of the most illogical extrapolations of modern science. What they're doing is observing traits that are known to vary, such as eye color, skull shape, stature, etc., and extending these observations to explain the origin of fixed traits for which there is no variation, such as the microarchitecture of a feather or metabolic pathways in humans. A dark moth can be favored by natural selection in a polluted environment. This doesn't explain how a whale could evolve from a land mammal. When a cow reproduces, there are variations in offspring, such as color, size, presence or absence of horns, resistant to disease, etc. But these variations are bounded, and everyone knows this. You can begin with a wild cow and create a breed of cow that produces more milk. You can't create a dolphin from a cow by just continuing the process for millions of years, because that would require fundamental change, not selection of pre-existing genetic variants that are already in the population. Let's consider the proposed evolution of the whale in terms of this proposal, descent with modification. If a whale evolved from a land-based mammal such as a cow, tail flukes couldn't have been created by simply modifying the cow's tail. None of the cow's offspring ever have a variation that could be construed as a step in the evolution of a whale's tail. Fundamental change would be required, and this means mutation, resulting in new genetic information. Nevertheless, this central Darwinian mechanism, random mutations plus natural selection plus time, is simplistically applied to every complexity of nature, known and unknown. This is an imagined mechanism. It has never been demonstrated to work, and based on observation and common sense, it doesn't work. The modern theory of evolution says that if you take a cow and add mutations and millions of years of natural selection, you can end up with a whale. So let's consider some important elements of this proposed mechanism. First, mutations, the source of all evolution, are random. This means that if a mutation occurs, it is independent of the one that preceded it and the one that follows it. If a mutation did occur that resulted in incipient tail flukes in an evolving marine mammal, that doesn't enhance the likelihood that another mutation is going to appear to improve upon the early design. If a mutation did result in incipient tail flukes, no variations or alleles of that trait will suddenly appear in the population to allow for future refinement of that design. The genetic variations in humans, according to evolutionary theory, took hundreds of thousands of years to appear in the population. Second point, the environment doesn't prompt the appearance of a mutation. If a mammal is starting to spend more and more time in the ocean, any mutation that appears in the population could affect any system. A mutation could result in the deregulation of a pancreatic enzyme, bone marrow suppression, or any of trillions of other possibilities. Life in the ocean does not increase the likelihood that a mutation will occur that involves the modification of a tail for swimming. A mutation creating incipient tail flukes is just as likely to appear in a rat or a giraffe as it is in an animal that's starting to live in the ocean. Some people look at the body of a streamlined dolphin and are amazed how the ocean shaped its anatomy. Bear in mind that according to evolutionary theory, mutations are the engine of evolution, not the ocean. Point number 3. No acquired characteristics can be transmitted to offspring. If an evolving marine mammal spent its entire life increasing its ability to swim, that trait is not passed on to the young. Now, this principle was unknown during Darwin's time, and virtually all biologists who accepted evolution believed that characteristics acquired during life could somehow be passed on to the offspring. And the fourth point, no evolution can occur for a future purpose. All changes must result in direct, short-term survival advantages. So if a whale's ability to navigate from the tropics to the poles came about through mutations, each incremental step had to confer an immediate survival advantage. Try to imagine that. Many evolutionary explanations imply that future advantages have driven evolution toward a goal because they can't be logically explained through known laws of biology. For example, in virtually every published article that attempts to explain the origin of sexual reproduction, invariably future advantages are cited. This constitutes a tacit admission of the need for intelligent design. Now, you don't need to look very deeply into nature to uncover some really severe dilemmas in view of this central Darwinian mechanism. Look at the proposed evolution of the dolphin, for example. If a team of engineers set out to design a perfect marine mammal, it would be difficult to improve upon the design of a bottlenose dolphin. An adult dolphin weighs an average of 600 pounds and can propel its entire body 25 feet above the surface of the water. This allegedly began with a precursor's tail such as seen in a hippo, a cow, or a wolf, which was totally useless in propulsion, gradually acquiring a flap of soft tissue at the tip of the tail with gradual improvement of design. So let's look at this proposal, bearing in mind the randomness of mutations. If mutations created a dolphin's tail, those mutations occurred in the perfect location, that is, tip of the tail, as opposed to any of thousands of other possible locations on the body. Those mutations resulted in the perfect orientation, that is, horizontal, in the perfect animal, a mammal that is starting to live in the ocean, involving the right tissue, connective tissue between skin and bone, as opposed to cartilage or some other type of tissue, with the perfect microanatomy, organized layers of fibrous tissue in a specific orientation to allow for strength and resilience, with the perfect shape, streamlined hydrofoil to allow for maximum thrust and minimum drag. Also consider the barrier of complex integrated parts. The pelvic organs would have to be modified so that they wouldn't be crushed when the posterior half of the body flexes and extends. The muscles of the tail would gradually increase markedly in size and strength. The spinous processes of the vertebral bodies would have to modify to support the increased muscle mass. The muscles and bones of the spinal column would have to be modified gradually to change from a side-to-side to up and down movement. This would require very complex anatomical changes. So if you restrict your thinking to evolutionary mechanisms, that is, random mutations, this means that there would have been many millions of suboptimal designs in each of these systems so that natural selection could choose the optimal design to result in the level of perfection that exists. Since millions of mistakes would be inevitable to achieve an optimal design, why are no such trial and errors ever seen in the billions of animals that we observe? The whale is alleged to have become fully aquatic in 8 million years. Think about the number of possible variations of just the tail. If you consider population sizes and number of generations, you would expect to see some trial and error mutations in literally every generation. In other words, for the central Darwinian mechanism to work, mutations resulting in different variations of tail morphology would have to be very common, and they are non-existent. Why have no such mutations ever been seen in the millions of rats observed in laboratories? After all, such mutations are just as likely to appear in a rat as they are in an evolving marine mammal. Rather than show that mutations could produce such a transformation, Evolutionists imagine that a whale's tail was gradually modified from a land mammal's tail. And as evidence, they sometimes present various tail morphologies in different mammals, none of which are even claimed to be related, and ask us to simply imagine that one form could evolve into another. This is nothing more than a hunch that is not even founded on known laws of biology. In essence, it's speculated that since different tail morphologies exist in different species, that a whale's tail must have gradually evolved through similar stages. You don't have to have any understanding of mathematics or biology to recognize that biology tells us that a whale couldn't have evolved through a random process. You can recognize that this central Darwinian mechanism is false because it defies what everyone observes. No such variations exist in any of the millions of species. Now, you might be told that these changes are too slight for us to see, but they're there, and natural selection will find them. This statement is founded entirely on imagination. No one has ever identified any of these mutations in any species. And this supposes that a blind process that has no intelligence can see what a trained scientist can't see. It also contradicts a doctrine that all evolutionists claim to be true, that the large majority of mutations are neutral and therefore can't be favored by natural selection. Now, rather than present a plausible explanation as to how a whale could have evolved through Darwinian mechanisms, a fragmented line of fossils is presented, with unconvincing imaginary forms that are not based on science. And this type of evidence is presented as if it's a gold standard, and you don't need to concern yourself or look any deeper as to how it happened. In addition, philosophical arguments are given, such as the statement that some embryonic whales show teeth that later regress, and therefore they're not a product of intelligent design. Molecular homology between cows and whales is argued as indicating common descent. This is just a philosophical argument based on a hunch. Many other examples can be cited. We're told that feathers evolved from reptilian skin. This would require millions of trial and error steps. The fact that no such mutations have ever been observed clearly refutes this idea. Now, you might be told that feathered dinosaurs have been found, so the feathers somehow evolved. And if you're not convinced, you need to just trust the interpretation of experts. The only way biologic evolution can be promulgated is to misrepresent its mechanism. Remember, every time someone tells you that something evolved, consider what is being claimed, that a purely random process that contradicts everything you observed was the engine of such a transformation.